Hello, my global family. We've reached the final chapter of the book of creation from the KOLBRIN Bible. Chapter 8, Gwineva, one-time wife of Adam, found refuge among people of Ordes where she gave birth to Gwineva the cuppy child. But as the child grew, it was seen that she had red hair. Though all knew there were fair-haired and dark-haired people, none had ever seen anyone with red hair. Also, strange maladies had manifested in Ordes for which the strangers were blamed. Therefore, because of these things, Neva and her child were driven out. They came to a pool near the border of Crocodiles and built a habitation of reeds, living there for many years. However, Neva was killed by a wild beast and Gwineva was left alone. But she learned much from familiars who came to her, and so she became a sorceress. Time went by, and the half-folk called Yoslings began to gather around her habitation, and they thought she was a goddess and worshipped her. As her fame spread, word came to Herview concerning the strange woman. So he sent men to find out about her and report. Gwineva knew about Herview, but he did not know who she was or that any child of Neva lived. When Herview heard the report, he was intrigued and sent men to escort her to him, and she came at his request. They brought her into his presence wearing a cloak of feathers and a garment of doeskin, her hair unbraided like that of other women, falling outside the cloak almost to her knees. He was amazed at the cascade of red hair, and his heart was stirred by her beauty. Herview gave Gwineva a bower and attendance, but she preferred to be attended by Yoslings whom the people about Herview despised. They gossiped about the strange woman, for it was seen that Yosling men freely entered her bower, yet her bearing was modest and maidenly, the Yoslings showing her every form of respect. It was the season of fruitfulness, and when Herview went to the gathering place, he took Gwineva with him. But the Yoslings could not be taken there, so they remained behind, but the people removed them. When they arrived at the gathering place and Gwineva saw Gwineva, he was startled, for he had seen such a woman in the darkened waters. But he welcomed her and was surprised at her wisdom and skill at sorcery. When the time came for Gwineva to prophesy and all who came to hear him were gathered about, they became apprehensive, for his coming forth was delayed and the moon began to disappear, eaten away by the blackness of the night. Then, when they started to jostle and flee, there was a great shout and Gwineva appeared. As he did, a great fire sprang up on either side of him. The people remained, for each was rooted to the place where he stood. Gwineva spoke at length, telling them that the night sky sign heralded a new era, that as the moon grew again in brightness, so should their race wax strong and virile, spreading wide across the face of the earth, driving lesser races before them. That a son of Herview would lead their sons out of Crocodiles, and his sons and their sons would continue westwardly towards Hesperus, meaning land of spirits, that there they would meet their final destiny. He told them that there would be a great bloodletting, when brother would fight with brother and father with son, but that this would be the planting of the central around which the framework for the structure of their race would be woven. He said, I shall go before the vanguard in spirit. Later, Herview asked Gwineva to cast the omen sticks and read the ashes, as he wished to know things concerning Gwineva. This Gwineva did, telling him that she was his fate mate, one destined to be his wife, that she was indeed a true maiden and he would not be forwarded. He said, she acts as she does through innocence and not through brashness. But what Gwineva told Herview was no more than a grain in the grainstick among all that which he knew. And so, when Herview returned to his homestead, he paid court to Gwineva and asked her to marry him, and this she consented to do after 1 year. The people, hearing what was intended, were displeased and murmured against the marriage, saying it was unseemly for their king to marry a sorceress and one strange in so many ways. Also, there was a custom forbidding the intermingling of blood. But there was no doubt as to what she was, some thinking she was one who could be acceptable. Gwineva was not the Bluckin of Herview, so as the marriage would not be incestuous, Gwineva decided she would say nothing of their relationship, for she was in love with him, and love is ever ready to make excuses. Yet, despite her knowledge and wisdom, her heart was full of fears because of her background, but she displayed none of her anxieties. She did not feel at ease among the people, but never asked that the Yoslings be allowed back. She tried to become acceptable by ministering to the sick with simples and remedies, but the more she cured and healed, the more people feared her, and fearing they shunned her, except they were in dire need of her help. However, Herview remained firm in his resolve to marry, though many advised that if he simply took Gwineva as a concubine or as something less than a wife, it would be more acceptable. They said none would object if she were treated as a woman with no standing, mate but do not marry, for marriage would grant her undue status, and is marriage so necessary? There's a wise man by the pie whereof he can freely eat at any time. Such sayings enraged Herview, for he knew Gwineva to be a woman reserved for marriage, and this he tried to tell the people. But they laughed, saying, she has bewitched you, put her to the test. But he replied, this is unworthy, for it displays doubt and distrust. A virgin is a virgin, whether named so by horn or won, it remains so whatever the conjectures of carnal-minded men who are more familiar with women of lesser repute. Yet whether the marriage bar applied was still a thing of doubt in the minds of many, for none knew the lineage of Gwineva, nor did she enlighten anyone, though it was customary to recite this at the betrothal. But Hervey and Gwineva remained unbetrothed, though the forthcoming marriage was made known. Now, the nephews and kin of Idovar nurtured seeds of discord among the people, and because it was a time of peace, when the skills of a war chief were not needed, many heeded their words, so it developed that there were those for Hervey and those against him. Then Hervey said to the people, "Let this not be something to cut people apart, but something which can be decided at the next folk feast." The seesawing time had passed, but it was not yet harvest. Tide and the young men held spear-throwing contests and tested each other in many manly skills. At such times, seated on a platform against the palisade, Hervey gave judgment and awarded merits. Inside the palisade was a walkway and places from which great stones could be hurled. And from one such place came a murderous weapon which cut down through Hervey's head to pierce the shoulder of his shield arm, striking him to the ground. Immediately there was a great tumult and confusion. Fighting broke out and men died. But Hervey was carried to safety in the bower of Gwineva. There he was protected by his retainers, but within the palisade all was taken over by those hostile to Hervey. Before the cowardly blow, those for Hervey had been more numerous and powerful, but after he was so sorely wounded they were less, and of these many were inclined to waver. For such is the nature of man. But to contrast with the frail reeds who wavered, those who remained loyal were resolute, for this too is the nature of man. Now, when Gwineva and the wise men attended to Hervey, they saw that while the shield arm had been injured, it was not unfeeling, for it grasped the hand of Gwineva. But this the sword arm could not do, though it was uninjured. Therefore, they knew the slaughter-bent weapon had been charmed, and no woman could remove such enchantment, nor could the wise men, for they were unblooded. In the days that followed, the enchantment caused demons to enter through the wound and take up their abode. So Hervey was tormented and body racked before subsiding into the quietness which precedes death. The demons had abused Gwineva and called her foul names and cried out in loud voices against people, so that they should abandon their king. The place where Hervey lay was near the lakeside, and in the lake was an island called Inscris, meaning Isle of the Dead, where those about to die were taken, as well as the dead, before being consigned to the waters, for the people believed that those given into the lake went straight into awareness in the other world, while anyone buried on land was only half aware upon arrival and remained half awake and half asleep for many years. So those loyal to Hervey carried him down to the boats and accompanied him and Gwineva to the isle, and they were not molested, for none interfered with those mourning the dead. On the isle were priests and 9 holy maidens who attended to the rites, while other women ministered to the newly dead. But Hervey was dead, though halfway across the threshold. When Hervey arrived, he was placed in a hospice house where Gwineva tended to him. Wood unopened Hervey's skull where it had been cleft and let out the demon which had taken up habitation there, and he brewed powerful potions which removed the enchantment. When, after many days, he departed, Hervey was no longer at the door of death, though weakened in many ways like a baby. While Hervey lay so sorely stricken, the kinsfolk of Idovar were disputing among themselves, and this led to fighting and battles. But none came near the isle to harm Hervey, because it was a sacred place and gave him sanctuary. When it came to the time of the folk feast, there was a great battle at the gathering place, and Gwineva was slain. There came a day when Hervey, though still not whole, could move about, and then he and Gwineva departed with those who remained with them. They were married before leaving their isle of sanctuary. They fled to a place afar off where, as the years went by, Hervey became whole again, and Gwineva gave birth to sons and daughters. It was a good place, fertile and well watered, and so they prospered. But there came a time of drought when the waters dried up and their flocks died. So Hervey sent men to Crocosses, and these came back saying that there, too, the land was stricken and the people distressed. He also sent others to the west, and they returned saying that there the land was not stricken, but the people would not accept them except with spears. Hervey then sent men back to Crocosses to tell the people there of the plenty which lay to the west, and they came back with a warband led by Italy's, and many people followed. Hervey could no longer bear weapons, and his sons were as yet young and unblooded. Therefore, he gave his 2 sons who were of sufficient age into the keeping of Ithales, so they might learn the art of war, and they followed him loyally, becoming men of valor in the conflict which ensued. Many people left Crocosses and settled in the land lying to the west, and Hervey and Gwineva also settled there. Time passed, and Hervey became renowned for his wisdom, and Ithales, king of Arania, honored him with lands and servants. Hervey's 2 sons, who had followed the king and were twins, married the king's 2 eldest daughters who were also twins. This caused problems for the king, though having 3 wives, was sonless. Therefore the twin sons of Hervey became his heirs. The king was perplexed, for the 2 men could not rule together, and both were of equal standing in his eyes. Yet it was the king's duty to nominate his heir and proclaim him to the people, so there should be no division after his death. Therefore, Ithilles consulted Herview as to how the judgment should be made, and Herview said, "Let fate decree who shall be king." In Arania, the people gathered 4 times a year for the folk feasts. At such times it was customary for new laws to be proclaimed, judgments given, and all contentious issues settled. So before the next folk feast, Herview prepared a man-made stone from sand, clay, and other things. And while it was still soft, he set the hilt of his great sword, Dislana the bitter, into it, and when the stone was hardened, Dislana was fast. The sword implanted stone was then set down near the place where the king gave judgment. Around it was drawn a wide circle bisected across. On the day when the people were first assembled to hear his words, Ithilles told them of his perplexity over the problem concerning the twin sons of Herview and his daughters. He said, "So the people are not divided, and the kingdom rent by strife. It is well this matter be settled now. Therefore, I'm setting a fair test involving no men other than these two whom I hold equally dear. Whichsoever of them shall remove their father's great weapon from this stone, so he frees it and grasps the hilt, shall become my lawful heir, with the other being to him as a younger brother. They will each try in turn during the duration of the fall of a feather. The first try being he who casts his bracelet over the blade. Then each of Herview's sons was placed in a spot where the bisecting line joined the circle. So they stood opposite each other, and each had 3 bracelets. They threw until one encircled the blade with his bracelet. Then this one tried to withdraw the weapon with his hand, but could not, because of the sharpness. The other tried by placing his 2 palms on each side of the blade, then pressing them together while lifting, but he could not move it either. The first one tried again, copying what had just been done more powerfully. So the stone almost lifted off the ground, but the sword did not leave the stone. Then the other approached the stone, but this time he put his hands under the edges of the stone, so he could lift it in his arms, and he dashed it down over a rock which was nearby, so it broke asunder. He then picked Dislana up by the hilt and brandished it over his head. The people acclaimed him while his brother grasped his arms, and congratulations. Thus, by wisdom was the problem overcome. We have completed the KOLBRIN Bible's Book of Creation. There are more books of the KOLBRIN awaiting our read. Thank you for listening to this narration, and I look forward to the future. Please like, subscribe, and share. Peace and one love.